Hi, I'm Jocelyn Matkins, Executive Director of the Teton Regional Land Trust, and I want to thank you for clicking on the link to check out this video. We're going to spend 10 or 15 minutes just reflecting on 30 years of conservation with the Teton Regional Land Trust and looking to the future at the conservation impact that we can still have. So, I was born and raised in eastern Idaho, and we spent a lot of time kicking around on our region's rivers and skiing at Targhee. And in 1990, we moved to the Wood River Valley, and that picture in the center is along the Haley Greenway, where I actually had my first job in conservation after I went to college in Colorado and got an undergrad degree in ecology. I had a job or two working for the Forest Service and eventually made it back to the Wood River Valley, where I got an internship with the Wood River Land Trust. That was about 20 years ago. And that picture is along the Haley Greenway a couple of years ago. And when I started there, they were just kicking off that project, and that really ignited my interest in conservation and land trusts. And 20 years later, here I am with the Teton Regional Land Trust. I've taken a couple of tours around since then. I've worked for two different other land trusts, the Placer Land Trust in California, and was the founding director of the Sagebrush Steppe Land Trust down in Pocatello, which is where I met Chet, and how I ended up at the Teton Regional Land Trust. And when he moved on, I became the executive director. So people often ask me where my family is from, and these pictures are actually of our family's homestead near Mud Lake in Idaho within the service area of the Teton Regional Land Trust. And they came at the turn of the last century from Kansas in search of land and water to establish a farm and to raise their family. And the picture right there, that is my grandmother, who was the oldest of four kids raised on the farm. And you can see here the irrigation water. They were a part, my family was a part of establishing a network of irrigation systems to bring more water to the land. And I'm just really honored to be a part of the Teton Regional Land Trust and able to work to protect important family lands and Eastern Idaho. I am the last of our family left in Eastern Idaho, and it's a real honor to be working at the Teton Regional Land Trust. So how can we sum up 30 years of conservation? It's hard to do here in just a few slides, but I will just highlight here that we were the first land trust established in Idaho back in 1990, and the first locally established land trust. The Nature Conservancy has a chapter here in Idaho that's been around for over 50 years, but we were the first locally based land trust. We were also the first land trust that was accredited in Idaho, and back in August, late August, we received word that we have been reaccredited for the third time. So that should give you and our network of support landowners and donors and community partners the confidence that we are striving for excellence in our conservation work. A few other stats: 166 protected properties and over 36,000 acres, and thousands of hours of volunteer time from board members to field volunteers to to our whole community of supporters who have made our work possible. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to start with a slide that is kind of the overall service area of the land trust and just touch on a few high level things. And then I'm going to zoom in to the Teton River, the South Fork, and the Henry's Fork and highlight a few things there. And then give a taste for sort of what we're looking at for the next few years and how that'll set us up for making an impact as we move forward into the next generation of conservation. So we were established by a group of local folks here in Teton Valley, led by Michael Whitfield, who was a wildlife biologist, but was also really aware of how important the working land landscape was going to be to sustaining the wildlife populations in our region. And in 1995, the Teton Valley Land Trust merged with the Fremont Heritage Trust, and we established our service area that you can generally see here. It's in the north, the border with Montana. And then to the east, we have the watersheds as it's flowing through the Henry's Fork, the Warm River, the Fall River, the Teton Basin and Teton River, and then the South Fork, and then the Big Desert out here. And essentially, we sort of drain the Upper Snake River watershed, with the exception of the Snake as it flows through Jackson, and we sort of pick that up as it empties out of Palisades and into the South Fork. And we have really always been about protecting the most important private lands on the landscape, and those really are the waterways, the wetlands, the rivers, the streams, those wildlife corridors, which are often along the waterways, but not always, and the working lands, those open spaces that allow wildlife to move through and often have important and critical habitat. And so on a landscape scale, we've really focused on the corridors, the river corridors, and some of those areas where we'll dive in a second and look at those zoomed in a little bit. But we have an incredible landscape here in eastern Idaho, iconic wildlife populations, amazing fisheries, just like cottonwood galleries, all of the things that you think about when you think about the West are all found here in our region. So let's just start with the Teton Valley, and this is a picture from the overlook above Harrops Bridge, and in the foreground is the conservation easement that we completed in 2008. And that was part of a grant called the North American Wetland Conservation Act grant. And those are $1 million grants. We're in our ninth one, I believe, right now. And those are really focused on wetland habitat. And in Teton Valley, we have one of the largest intact wetland complexes in the Greater Yellowstone that's not found on public land. So in the heart of the valley, Teton River meanders through a really large wetland that is really critical to a whole variety of species and to us as humans. It keeps our water clean and well oxygenated and cool for the amazing fishery, and provides really unique and important habitat for wildlife. Like, sandhill cranes is a great example. We host the largest population of staging sandhill cranes in the Greater Yellowstone every fall, because we have those wetlands that are in close proximity to the private lands and the cultivated agricultural fields. The cranes love to feed on the cut grain, the leftover grain. They like it cut so that they can, have it down and be able to see predators. And so they spend their evenings, their nights in those shallow wetlands, and then they wake up in the morning and the evening and they feed on the spent grain in the nearby fields. And that's just one example. If you floated the river, you know that there's moose and otter and beaver and a whole array of other birds and wildlife, and that is just an incredible place. And we finished our very first conservation easement near the confluence of Teton Creek and the Teton River, and since then have really been building on that to have almost 12,000 acres protected, 90 different individual projects, and altogether they have really resulted in a landscape scale impact for Teton Valley. When you float the river, there's about 25 miles that is protected with a conservation easement. That's about 50% of the corridor from Fox Creek down to Harrops Bridge. And I have a lot of really exciting projects in the works as well, with landowners interested in protecting their land, and we hope to be able to accomplish that in the next couple of years. The next area where we've done a lot of work and I think is really exceptional is along the South Fork of the Snake River. And with our partners of the Snake River Partnership that include the Conservation Fund, the Nature Conservancy, and the Bureau of Land Management, together we have worked to bring land and water conservation fund dollars to the South Fork and have protected the vast majority of the South Fork River Canyon, which it hosts one of the largest cottonwood galleries left in the lower 48 and is the most biologically diverse habitat in all of Idaho. And if you've had the chance to float that river, you know what a unique and special place it is. And thanks to the partnership and to the landowners along the river, it is going to be a place in the future where the wildness of eastern Idaho can still thrive. And without the partnership and the work of the partners, it's very, very likely that that canyon would look really different, would have a lot more homes and golf courses and resorts and all sorts of stuff. So I'm just really grateful that we've been able to accomplish as much as we have in that incredible landscape. And in the last couple of years, we've turned our attention. So if you're going from Swan Valley to Idaho Falls, on the right is the South Fork. To the left is a mountain range, and the Tex Creek Wildlife Management Area is back in there. And it's a really incredible area that has sagebrush steppe and mixed forests and aspen and beaver dams and all sorts of different habitats that are really representative of the Greater Yellowstone and that are relatively intact, and that provides habitat for sage grouse and sharp-tailed grouse and wintering elk and mule deer. And we're working right now on what will be our largest contiguous conservation easement. We hope to close in the first quarter of 2021 and have a handful of projects in the works there as well. So lots of really exciting stuff going on here. And maybe before I switch to the next slide, I'll just reflect a little bit on a place like this and what it offers our community, our residents, and our visitors. And especially in the time of the pandemic, we've all turned to nature. It was a safe place to be outside, to gather with family and friends and camping. And, we saw a lot of people here this summer enjoying what we all love here. And we've seen a lot of people moving here. And, that's okay. I welcome anybody that wants to move here. I get it. It's an incredible place to live, to raise a family, to recreate. And we can do that and protect the wildlife and the open space and the way of life if we are strategic about it, and if we protect those important migration corridors and unique habitats. We have that opportunity. And also, while we're in on this map, this is a good place to kind of just give an idea of the patterns on the landscape. So the light green is the Forest Service. The blue is the state of Idaho, and the white is the private lands. And then along the river, you can see anywhere that you have a dark green, and the stripes kind of represent different funding sources. Dark green is where the Land Trust has worked. The purple in here, as I mentioned, this is an incredible partnership. That's the Conservation Fund. The orange is conservation work done by the Nature Conservancy, and then the yellow is Bureau of Land Management. And this gives you a really good sense of how we've been able to do projects with individual landowners to piece together protection along an entire river corridor. You can see from Swan Valley to, through the canyon, that the majority of that is protected. And so we've been able to accomplish a lot there, and there's more to come. And so moving on to the next landscape is the High Divide and the Henry's Fork. And this area is along the Montana border and with Idaho. And borders the Yellowstone National Park and the Island Park area, the Shotgun Valley, and then out into the Big Desert and the High Divide, that maintaining the permeability of the landscape so that, wildlife that are in the greater Yellowstone can connect to the big wilderness area like the Frank Church and on up into Montana and Canada. So maintaining open migration corridors for wildlife and for, genetic diversity and all of that. This is really a great area to be focused on, that landscape scale impact. And we've been able to complete a lot of work in that landscape over the last 30 years, 43 projects, 16,000 acres. And the opportunities that we have going forward, 8 projects that would protect almost 17,000 acres. And you might be asking or wondering, well, how are we going to do that? You've, sort of talked about over 20,000 acres of new opportunities. And for the Land Trust, core to our work is incentivized voluntary land conservation. And while we do have many landowners that have donated their development rights through a conservation easement, we also work to raise funds. And the opportunity that we have on the table right now is about $20 million. And we're really striving over the next 3 to 5 years to make that happen. And a lot of that will be federal grants like the Land and Water Conservation Fund that we were talking about on the South Fork, North American Wetland Conservation Act, and projects through the Farm Bill. But they take private dollars to leverage in terms of our staff time. For every dollar that you get to help support a staff member to work on these conservation projects, $10 goes into the ground, resulting in permanent land conservation. So those operations dollars are critically important. And then we're also always seeking private dollars to match those federal sources as well. And so, that's really our hope and goal for the next 3 to 5 years, is to take advantage of the interests that landowners have to protect their land and increase the scope and scale of our work on the landscape. And you can help. So, in addition to what, really is our bread and butter, conservation easements that we're working with landowners to, protect their family lands and sort of feed up into a landscape scale impact, we also think that it is critically important to connect our community with our work and with nature, and that is important to instill in the next generation. And a couple of ways that we're doing that. One associated with our Greater Yellowstone Crane Fest, which we really hope to be able to have towards the end of September in 2021 in person. We'll see on that. But we've had a Cranes in the Classroom program where for the last few years, we've gone into 2nd grade classes with essentially sort of a show and tell of cranes and crane ecology and migration, and then an art project. And the 2nd graders have just loved that program. And when we were sort of faced with the lockdowns and the school closures last year, or this, in 2020, we were able to work on that Cranes in the Classroom and create a video series with a script for educators, or kids could just watch the video. And then we also have a teacher trunk program that was sort of pre-COVID, that teachers could come and check out a big tub of interactive materials and lessons plans, and go out to like Woods Creek Bend or different areas and teach the lessons. And what we're really doing now is this Teacher Trunks 2.0, where we're sort of combining the video component of the Cranes in the Classroom with the interactive lessons and props and fun things like replica crane skulls and eggs and that sort of thing. And we've developed curriculum from kindergarten through 4th grade, and they build on each other over over time, and they'll have the video lesson. They'll have the ability to watch the video. There'll also be the checkout boxes, and they'll be, for classrooms and or individual sort of learning pods. Just a family could check one out. And then they'll also have a family field trip or a school field trip with instructions. And hopefully eventually we'll be able to get out again with the kids. But in the meantime, for the year ahead, we're going to be developing these lessons. And what's really exciting about this too is we've got a grant from a couple of local folks here in Teton Valley that are going to help us partner with the Hispanic Resource Center to do these lessons in both English and Spanish. So we'll be able to broaden and deepen that connection with our whole community here in Eastern Idaho. A couple other things that we have in the works for 2021. If you were on our e-news, you know that we had some Teton Talks last year, a little webinar series, and also did some walks. Going forward, we're going to reboot Teton Talks for 2021 through May, I think. And then we're also going to have some accompanying small group field trips. And so keep your eyes posted for those. And then the last thing is we're really looking to bring music to the land. And we're partnering with Hunter Novick and his In a Landscape series. And we'll be sharing more about the work that he does. But he brings his amazing grand piano out onto protected properties and gives everybody headphones, and you're able to walk around on the landscape and listen to his incredible music and storytelling. So those are just a couple of the things that are in store for the year ahead as we continue to strive to connect with our community, to connect with nature, and continue the momentum of the conservation impact that we're having for our region and our way of life. So I just want to say thanks for spending the time to listen to this brief overview, and I encourage you to reach out to me or to any one of our other staff members if there's something in there that you're just like, oh, I want to learn a little bit more about that. Why is the Island Park area so important to the viability of Yellowstone? It's one of those critical areas on the landscape that if we subdivide it and make it so that wildlife can't move through, we're going to have an impact on Yellowstone National Park. So, there's so many cool things that are going on in our region, and so many things that the Land Trust is doing, and we would love to share that with you. So reach out, and in the meantime, have an awesome new year, and we'll hope to see you in 2021. Thanks.